Morning, everyone.
Morning.
The economy is collapsing. Trump tariffs are raising costs on hardworking American taxpayers. Small businesses are closing. Businesses and corporations are unable to invest and hire people. And Republicans are driving us toward a painful recession. Donald Trump and House Republicans promised the American people last year that they were going to lower costs on day one. But costs aren't going down, they're going up. Inflation is going up. And life is getting more expensive in the United States of America. The House Republican majority has been a complete and utter failure. They've now had the opportunity to govern for 125 days, and we haven't seen a single bill that actually has moved to the floor that is designed to make life more affordable. Instead, what House Republicans are doing is trying to jam this extreme budget down the throats of the American people that would visit the largest cut to health care in American history, and at the same time take food out of the mouths of children, veterans, and families in order to pay for a massive tax cut for their billionaire donors like Elon Musk. It's totally and completely unacceptable. And House Democrats will continue to strongly oppose it today, tomorrow, this week, next week, and as long as it takes until we can bury this extreme budget in the ground, never to rise again. Questions?
Leader Jeffries, with the president promoting meme coins and stable coins, what are Democrats doing to make sure that this isn't just a new way to gain political access?
There's an ongoing conversation amongst House Democrats led by several different committees, including Financial Services, Judiciary, and House Oversight. And those conversations are actually going to be bicameral as well to address this issue.
Mr. Leader, good morning, thank you. Obviously, I know you're staunch opposition to this bill, but what about a high-tax state like yours when they deal with SALT and provisions in this that your constituents would benefit from having lower taxes if they were to approve that provision? Is that something that they would in fact benefit from? And how do you explain your opposition to the rest of the bill, even if there's benefit in that portion of the bill for them?
Republicans haven't even been able to get their act together on the state and local tax deduction. And the reality is they can't fool the voters. Extreme MAGA Republicans put the state and local tax deduction cap in place, which has cost hard-working American taxpayers thousands of dollars a year. For people all across the country, including in New York. Donald Trump, House Republicans, and Senate Republicans, let's be clear, not a single Democrat supported capping the state and local tax deduction. That was done by Republicans when they enacted the GOP tax scam. They crashed the car and want to pretend now that they're on a rescue operation. Give me a break. If nothing happens, if there is nothing done with respect to the state and local tax deduction cap by the end of the year, you know what happens? It goes away. So anything that Republicans are doing that relates to a cap actually will increase taxes on the American people, not lower taxes. Let's be clear about that. This whole tax cap situation is phony. They're not reforming a thing. Because literally, if nothing is done, then the $10,000 state and local tax deduction cap goes away on January 1st of next year. The voters are smart enough to know that this whole effort is phony because Republicans imposed the cap in the first place and are doing nothing but tinkering around at the edges, as opposed to allowing the cap to disappear, which will happen if nothing is done.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Can you just talk a little bit about, and again, understanding that you oppose this reconciliation bill, but obviously it looks like Republicans are kind of backing away from like the per capita caps, FMAP. I mean, I know you've been trying to keep the pressure on. It seems like they're coalescing around work requirements. Just, where do you stand on that?
Well, Republicans have already voted, each and every one of them, with the exception of Massey, to enact up to $880 billion in cuts to Medicaid, the largest cut to health care in American history. They're already on record that was their objective. The American people have risen up. Democrats are pushing back aggressively. And so some Republicans are backing off of the effort to try to decimate the health care of the American people. But we're not going to let up, because there are still large forces within the House Republican Conference who think that $880 billion in Medicaid cuts is not sufficient. And the reality is, the extreme wings of the House Republican Conference have driven a lot of the agenda up until this point, and we believe that will continue. And so we'll see what happens if, in fact, there is a energy and commerce markup next week. But the battle lines have been drawn. Democrats are standing on the side of health care and the American people. Republicans, once again, are trying to take it away.
Thank you, Leader Jeffries. What's the state of the American dream, and how does your vision specifically make it more competitive than the one Republicans are making?
Republicans are crashing the economy, raising costs, and driving us toward a recession. They are undermining the American dream when they promise to make life more affordable. This majority, this presidency, has been a complete and total disaster for working class Americans. They lied all of last year about what their plans were, and now they're trying to do the exact opposite. Firing thousands of veterans? Does that actually enhance the American dream? Taking health care away from hardworking American taxpayers? Does that enhance the American dream? Of course it does not. Actually ripping food out of the mouths of children, families, and veterans. About 20% of households with veterans rely upon the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program for food assistance so that they don't have to go hungry. And this is what they're trying to do. None of this, in terms of the Republican agenda, relates to enhancing the American dream. Our vision, which I began to lay out last week, and that will continue during these second 100 days, recognizes the fact that access to the American dream, of course, has to be earned. You have to work hard. You have to play by the rules. But when you do those two things, which is the case for the overwhelming majority of people in this great country, you should have an affordable home, be able to educate your children, have access to high-quality health care, have a good paying job that allows you to live a comfortable life. And of course, at the end of the day, you should be able to retire with grace and dignity, which is why we want to protect and strengthen Social Security and Medicare. That's our vision of the American dream. And it's been our vision going all the way back to FDR and the New Deal, where the foundation was laid, including with Social Security, continuing through Democratic administrations over the decades. And that's the mantle that we inherit. And we know that there are far too many people in this country who are living paycheck to paycheck, and the American dream is broken for them. It shouldn't be struggling to survive in America, the wealthiest country in the history of the world. And so, as this Congress continues, we'll continue to lay out our vision, which is designed to lift people up and make sure that in every single corner, in every single community throughout this country, people have access to the American dream. and the Republicans whose whole agenda is driven by actually trying to make life better for their billionaire donors, the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected.
A number of Democrats who walked out of a hearing earlier this week on crypto. Can we expect to see similar types of protests moving forward?
Yeah, it wasn't a hearing that they walked out on because there was no actual hearing. Once Ranking Member Maxine Waters objected to the hearing proceeding, pursuant to the rules, the Republicans were unable to have a hearing. So at that point, there was no hearing. It was just a conversation. And some Democrats decided not to participate in that conversation, and other Democrats decided that they were going to participate in that conversation. But no one walked out on a hearing because there was no hearing, given that the Republicans were unable to secure the consent of Maxine Waters. Last row.
A lot of your members are still frustrated about the way things went down with Leader Schumer and the CR in March, and more broadly, the old school way that he and some other Senate Democrats do politics. I know you've said that you stand behind his leadership, but do you have any things that you would like to see him do to adapt to this new political environment?
We're going to continue to work together with our Senate Democratic colleagues in a more is more environment. We all, every single one of us, myself included, has to continue to do more to meet the moment as it relates to an unprecedented assault on the economy, healthcare, Social Security, the rule of law, the American way of life, due process, and democracy. We're in a more is more, environment, and that's what all of us are going to continue to do. We've had very constructive and productive conversations with Leader Schumer and our Senate Democratic colleagues about making sure we're in alignment, as we are, in strongly opposing the extreme Republican budget. And then when, the moment presents itself, we'll work together as it relates to the end of this fiscal year. Thanks. Second row?
Thank you, Leader. There's a continued bipartisan push.
Go Chad with the mic again.
You know you're in trouble when I show up.
Okay.
Thank you. Continued bipartisan effort to get some kind of congressional stock ban in place. I wanted to see if you had any conversations with the Speaker about that yet, or GOP leadership at all. I know where you stand, but if you're having conversations across the aisle on that.
I have not had a conversation with Republican leadership on this issue yet. I strongly support the effort to get this done. Thanks. Kevin?
We are.
Hometown, hometown.
I know. Same area.
Yeah.
This past week, we've seen Trump kind of wade in a not direct way, the governor's race in New York. I'm curious what you make of him endorsing Lawler for New York 17, and in general, as you look to hold on to your cohort of swing seats in New York, is there someone you'd rather see running against Hochul next year, a Stefanik, a Lawler, et cetera?
Well, I think that, Governor Hochul has just demonstrated her incredibly strong leadership as it relates to the most recent budget agreement in Albany, and she is strongly positioned to win re-election against whoever emerges on the Republican side, all of whom basically have functioned as a rubber stamp for Donald Trump's extreme agenda. Every single House Republican in New York and across the country has functioned as a rubber stamp for Donald Trump's extreme agenda. That's the reality of the situation. Mike Lawler is apparently Donald Trump's favorite swing seat Republican in the country. That was a glowing endorsement. They apparently have a very close working relationship. Mike Lawler has clearly been very compliant with the Trump agenda. Otherwise, you're not going to see that kind of endorsement. So it's going to be a very interesting thing for Representative Lawler to have to explain to the people that he represents in New York's 17th congressional district why he has such a close relationship with someone who I can guarantee you, meaning Donald Trump, is deeply underwater in terms of favorability in Westchester and in Rockland. Stay on this side, okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Leader Jeffries. So the Senate is voting on a resolution that repeals a Biden administration policy. It allowed schools and libraries to lend Wi-Fi hotspots to students. Senator Cruz says that the FCC's rule is illegal, raises taxes, and puts kids at risk due to a lack of limits on their broadband. Now, there is a version of this that was introduced in the House. I want to get your thoughts on it. Should the House take something like this up? And I want to know where you stand on keeping access versus those concerns, because a lot of schools in New York actually utilize this kind of program.
Well, we obviously want to maximize access to the internet and high-speed internet in particular in this information age that we're living in. And so, from my standpoint, we would closely scrutinize anything that's being done that would actually limit access to public school children across America, particularly in urban America and in rural America and in small-town America, which have been struggling in terms of access to high-speed internet. And that's why Democrats, under the leadership of President Biden and Vice President Harris, were aggressively leaning into this area. Again, I just don't understand, like, why are Republicans doing these things that clearly hurt the American people? They're going to have to explain themselves. They're running away from town hall meetings. Democrats continue to run toward town hall meetings. What are you afraid of? Why are you afraid of the American people? I think the answer is because they are actively doing things to hurt the American people. And this may be another example of that.
Will you push against if Speaker Johnson brings it up?
Well, I've got to take a look at what actually comes to the House floor, and I'm unfamiliar with the provision in the Senate. But conceptually, I've got a problem with it. If the result is to limit access or reduce access to Wi-Fi, broadband access, or high-speed internet.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Obviously, House Democrats have spent a lot of time pushing back against these proposed Medicaid and SNAP cuts, but the budget resolution also includes up to $330 billion in cuts from the Educational Workforce Department. They put out their legislation that cuts, that targets student aid and loan programs. On top of that, President Trump issued his FY26 budget that calls for 15% cuts to the department while adding $60 million for new charter schools. First, I want to know, do you think that that's part of the administration's push to continue to try to privatize education? And as appropriation season picks up, how will House Democrats speak to the American people about how their taxpayer dollars should be invested in the public education of America's children?
Yeah, the Trump budget is dead on arrival. It's not happening, which leads to the question, why would you put forward such a reckless budget that you know House Democrats and Senate Democrats are going to strongly oppose? It's going nowhere. When we are in the middle of a reconciliation fight where you are already trying to do extreme things that hurt the health, the safety, the education, and the well-being of the American people. Our view, consistent with what the great Frederick Douglass once said, is that it is easier to build strong children than it is to repair broken men or broken women. And if you invest in a high-quality education at the front end, everyone in America benefits from investing in our public schools. That's what we should be doing. The reckless Republican budget, of course, includes cuts to health care that are devastating, cuts to food assistance that are devastating, cuts to housing that are devastating, and cuts to education that are devastating. There are numerous reasons to oppose the reckless Republican budget, and certainly the attack on public education is one of those reasons.
Thank you, Leader. A poll released earlier this week found that 75% of Democrats support extending Trump's 2017 tax cuts. And House Democrats, however, have said that they have suggested that they will oppose a tax cut extension in the Republicans' budget package. does this seem out of step with voters? Why did House Democrats kind of appear like maybe they're not in line with voters on this issue?
A little confused by that question. The overwhelming majority of Democratic voters and the overwhelming majority of Americans strongly oppose the devastating cuts to health care, the largest cut to Medicaid in American history. They want us to protect their health care. They want us to protect nutritional assistance for children, veterans, and families. And they don't want to provide massive tax breaks to MAGA billionaire donors like Elon Musk. Democrats in the House are very clear. We support making sure that the tax code is fair to everyday Americans, working class Americans and middle class Americans. And we, of course, would support making sure that everyday Americans don't pay a dime in additional taxes. That is our position. That's very clear. And the notion that Democratic voters actually support massive tax cuts for people like Elon Musk, of course that is not the case. So I'm unfamiliar with the poll that you're talking about, but very confident that we are in alignment in the positions that we are taking in opposition to this GOP tax scam, that the voters are with us. Last question.
Yes, sir. You just discussed all kinds of cuts, but what about eliminating funding for arts and the humanities? Is there anything that your caucus can do to oppose
Yeah.
this?
Well, I think when we invest in children, of course, we want to make sure that we invest in reading, writing, and arithmetic, that we provide them with the ability to master science and technology and have the tools so that they can survive in the innovation economy. But part of a holistic education also involves exposure to art and culture and music. And we will continue to support efforts that lift those programs up. And of course, there's a role to play for those programs in every single community, very popular in rural America, in small town America, in suburban America, and in urban America as well. Go Knicks.
Knicks